Hi, this is Benjamin Hossack. I'm one of the founders of Foregenix, and today I'm going to take you through our May 2020 Global Website Security Update. The aim of these updates is to provide the industry with the latest intelligence on threats that we're seeing in the e-commerce sector. And in the interests of keeping things tight, we'll only have a few slides, and this update will be less than 10 minutes. For those who don't know who we are, Foregenix is a cybersecurity business with a very strong focus on the payment card industry. Our team is global, and we support a diverse global client base. Now, before we get into the update, I want to draw your attention to the Visa announcement earlier this year on MagentaOne. Support for MagentaOne ends in June 2020, and this could present the industry with a significant level of risk that is perhaps less well quantified or understood. And I'll dig into this over the next couple of slides. So what is WebScan? WebScan is technology that we've developed off the back of many years of forensic work, helping a considerable number of hacked e-com sites to secure their online businesses and help them get back on their feet after a breach. Basically, every single new bit of malware that we detect, every new indicator of compromise that we find is put into our scanning database so that we can detect it at scale around the world. Now, the key thing to note at this point is that our scanner is no more intrusive than a regular visitor visiting the website. All we're doing is searching for those very specific bits of information to understand if the site is healthy or sick, if the site has already been hacked, what platform it's on, whether it's set up correctly, if it's missing critical security patches or not, and so on. And then what we do is we pull all that information together to give the site a risk score and a risk category. Now, there are a number of different risk categories, but for the purposes of this update, the most important to focus on are the high and critical risk categories. We see these two categories as the problem zone in the industry. Now, high risk means that there are serious security issues with the website. Perhaps it's missing critical security patches, or it's been set up with the default settings in place, like the admin page being easy to find, and so on. High risk websites don't appear to be hacked at this point, but with the focus of a reasonably skilled criminal, they could be broken into within 30 minutes on average. Critical risk means that the site is hacked. It's hacked right now, and it's losing payment card data at this very moment. Now, if you have an e-commerce portfolio, these are the two categories that we believe present the highest risk to you. And understanding who in your portfolio fits into these categories will help you to streamline your resources, time, and money to focus on mitigating your highest risk clients. And those are the merchants who are currently hacked and racking up liabilities, and then those merchants and websites which could very easily be next in line to get hacked. Right, let's get into the results. So our recent scan that we completed towards the end of April was on a data set of just over 7.7 million websites. And as you can see, WordPress is still the most prevalent platform. There are considerably more sites using WordPress than anything else. But the one that I want to draw your attention to is MagentaOne. With 221,000 MagentaOne websites, MagentaOne makes up 3.2% of our dataset. Now remember this because it becomes very relevant in a couple of slides' time. Now, looking at the dataset from a slightly different perspective, we can see the size of the problem in the industry. Right now, at this moment, this is made up from the high and the critical risk websites. At roughly 8.9% of the dataset, the high and critical risk websites are the issue that we need to grapple with today. And interestingly, this percentage seems to be fairly consistent with scans that we've been performing over time. In fact, what we have been seeing is that as our data set has grown, the high and critical risk percentage has slightly decreased. So it's worth bearing in mind that if you have a portfolio of e-commerce merchants and you're trying to work out what level of risk sits within your portfolio, it's likely to be in the region of between 8 and 10%. This is what we've been seeing for some time now, and that would be a pretty good yardstick for you to use. So let's dive into the critical risk websites. There are currently 2,918 critical websites in our dataset. Now remember that these sites are hacked, and their customer data is being stolen from them right now, transaction by transaction. Their liabilities are growing right now, transaction by transaction too. And similar to the last couple of months, MagentaOne websites remain a hot target for criminals. The interesting fact here is that they make up 3.2% of our website database and 65% of the hacked websites that we picked up last month. And simply on that statistic, we could say that there's a very strong indication that MagentaOne sites are getting targeted. But we'll dive into MagentaOne in a bit more detail shortly to expand on this theory. Now, another interesting find is the type of malware that's being used to steal this data. As you can see in the bar chart, skimmers make up the vast majority of the malware we're seeing. This is a catch-all for things like MageCart and the many other derivatives of malicious JavaScript code that we're seeing out there. Loaders could also be added to the skimmer family, since they are simply loading skimming code from another malicious domain or hacked website. So when you add the skimmers and the loaders together and consider them related, we're talking about 93% of the malware that we're detecting being skimmer code. So comparing this with the data over the last couple of months, the numbers have been growing. So the absolute number of skimmers is up over 200 in the last 2 months. So there are 200 more sites with skimmer code compared with 2 months ago. And the percentages are consistently around 93% of the hacked sites. So that's quite interesting. This is the threat that your e-commerce merchants are having to deal with and having to mitigate. And really, if you think about it, what is a threat to them is a threat to you. Now, this bar chart shows how much MagentaOne sites are being targeted and compromised relative to the other platforms out there. It's easily the most targeted platform. Magento 2 is the second most targeted, but it's only a little ahead of WordPress, OpenCart, and the others. I mentioned earlier that websites in the high-risk category are generally really straightforward to hack, and it would take on average roughly half an hour for a reasonably skilled attacker to break into one of them. Well, the reason I wanted to show you these numbers is because we have 207,925 MagentaOne websites in this category. Now, this is up from 202,000 sites last month. So we've had an increase of 5,000 MagentaOne sites moving into the high-risk category in the last 30 days. I'm drawing your attention to this because, as I mentioned earlier, MagentaOne will be end-of-life in June 2020. This means there will be no more security updates provided for the platform by Magento. So just looking at the number of websites that are on MagentaOne that are currently high risk, I am very, very concerned that we as an industry are about to see a serious number of breaches taking place over the next couple of months. Now, I probably don't need to remind you that Magento, the platform, is not the problem. In fact, if you are running a reasonably successful online business, you'd probably have started with a platform like Wix or maybe Shopify, and as you've grown, you've needed more functionality, more power, and more capability to support the growth. Well, the leading platform to support this growth space in the last couple of years has been Magento. Now, Magento is a fantastic platform, but it also needs to be set up correctly and then kept up to date. And it requires a bit more effort than Wix and Shopify, but that's part of the trade-off that you get when you want greater power and functionality. And this is where the problem lies. These MagentaOne sites are simply not being set up and maintained properly, so they become easy targets. And unfortunately, most of the hacked organizations that we've helped have failed at that, and a few other really important areas, but I'm not going to dig into those today. In fact, if you want to find out more about them, our blog has been documenting our findings over the last few years with really simple, straightforward advice on how to secure the sites. Now, I'm going to focus on MagentaOne for a couple of slides. I've mentioned that the end of life for MagentaOne is approaching. It's approaching in less than 45 days' time. Going on our statistics, MagentaOne is easily the platform with the most criminal malware. And I'm talking specifically about malware that steals payment card data for now. I'm not going to go into crypto miners and all those other types of malware. There are plenty of sites with those sort of problems too. And in fact, we could probably run a whole series of webinars or presentations on those. We're talking about payment card data theft. Now, this is probably a good time to bring some of the facts together about MagentaOne that we've drawn from our scanning results over the last few months. We've got a data set of 221,000 MagentaOne websites. Now, that makes up 3.2% of our entire portfolio of websites that we monitor. Now, that 3.2% of our portfolio makes up 65% of the hacked sites that we found last month. Now, the next point is equally important. Nearly 92% of all MagentaOne sites that we monitor are considered high risk. I'll say that again. Nearly 92% of all MagentaOne sites that we monitor are considered high risk. So there's no doubt in our minds that MagentaOne sites are being picked off and targeted by criminals, and it's for good reason. They're not that difficult to break into. They're missing critical security patches. They've got issues with the way they're set up, the way they're managed, so that's why they're in high risk. So they become a really easy target. Now, if you think about this from a portfolio management perspective, the easiest way to significantly reduce risk in your portfolio, your e-com portfolio is to start with your MagentaOne merchants. So in summary, without running through the stats again, I believe that if you've got an e-com portfolio and you're thinking about how to mitigate your risk, you could do a lot worse than focusing on your merchants that use MagentaOne. Now, I'm not going to get into the details of how the upgrade process works and all the different options. I mean, that's not our business. But what I can say is that what I found out about it is the migration process is not straightforward and it's not quick, especially if it's done properly. Now, the risks associated with migrating from MagentaOne to another platform or to Magento 2 are quite high. They need to be managed. So your merchants, if they have got any sense in maintaining their sites and maintaining their search engine optimization, they will be taking this very carefully and planning it and getting the upgrade done with as little risk as possible. So what can these merchants do in the meantime while they are working through the upgrade process? What can you do in the meantime while you wait for them to upgrade? Well, our advice is to secure those sites and ensure them. Now, securing the sites, you can use a solution like our Foregenix web solution. You need active security on those sites. You need them to be actively monitored and protected. And then from an insurance perspective, you need to insure them against the possibility of a data breach. Now, most of the sites that we come into contact with have neither insurance nor security. So you could add a lot of value to them very quickly if you could help them get insured and secured. Now, if you need information on either insurance or security, please get in touch and we will link you up with friendly brokers who understand the problem that needs solving. And of course, we're able to help from a security perspective. So if you found this update useful, please share it and let's get the word out there into the industry. A few simple changes to how these websites are managed and maintained could massively reduce risk for all of us. Thank you very much for listening today, and if you've got any questions, please get in touch. Thank you.